Welcome back. All right, so what everybody's talking about right now is that the New York Rangers just got fined $250,000 for coming out and publicly criticizing and calling for the job of George Peros. I see that and I think to myself, do they understand it's not just George Peros in the Department of Player Safety? He's the public face of it. He's the one that takes all this blame. He's not the only one. He's not the only one there. He doesn't make the decisions all by himself. He doesn't get these video clips from a game and make all the decisions all by himself. It's not just him making these choices. Do I think they need to change things? Yes. So what's the proper route the Rangers should have taken? Well, the owner, who was clearly upset with what happened, James Dolan, should have contacted Gary Bettman. Sure, he has his phone number, and said, I think this is BS. I think this is wrong. I think this was the wrong call. And have a conversation with him, or talk to Bill Daly. And I'm sure he could have been put in contact as well with George Peros. They could have done a conference call, a Zoom call, where Peros is involved, or somebody else in player safety is involved, Bettman, and the owner of the Rangers, and have a discussion. And start a discussion on, okay, so here's what we suspend for and here's what we don't, and should that change? I think there's a really good conversation to have there. I do. I think there's a really good conversation to have, and I think we'll have it. As for people who are saying, oh, this is the return of old time hockey, it's not. Next year's schedule, we're not going to see division rivalries like this. If we go back to conference playoffs, which is 1 versus 8, if they do a schedule where you play everybody twice and you might play teams 3 times, maybe 4 over an 82 game schedule, these rivalries just disappear. And I mentioned coming into this season that we'd see the return of rivalries, and I'd remembered, just how ugly rivalries could get, and here we are. And this is how rivalries get really ugly. And to be honest, I'm kind of surprised we didn't see more of it this year than we did. But when we get back to the normal schedule, it's going to go back to fighting doing this, because we don't have as many goons in hockey. I mean, they're not coming back. We're not going back to a game where, a guy who has 400 penalty minutes plays 3 minutes a game. That's not coming back. But the issue I had last night was I remember it was the Ryan Strome fight that really stuck out to me, where I thought, okay, so if Strome here breaks his hand, then what? And it's one of those things that just stands out to me, where I'm like, okay, so, and when I'm watching these fights and I'm like, I think the Rangers lost that one and they lost that fight, and I mean, this is while I'm flipping around because there's 4 different games on, right? I just, yeah, and then the danger becomes, I remember after the 2011 final between Vancouver and Boston, Vancouver overcorrected. Vancouver saw what Boston did. Now they put their team together and they went, "Oh, hey, we need to build a team that can beat Boston." So 2011, 2012, they did beat Boston in the regular season, and then they lost in the first round in 5. And I really thought part of what happened with Vancouver was they tried to overcorrect. So if the Rangers in the offseason try to overcorrect and beef up their lineup, and if they do it at the expense of some of the skill that has made the Rangers so much fun to watch over the last 2 seasons, they've become one of my favorite teams to watch. And it's weird because it shows how much I'm far more likely to cheer for a team now based on who's playing on it, more than the jersey itself. For the Rangers, I really like Kakko. I like Lafreniere a lot. I think that Zibanejad's electrifying when he's on, and Panarin's such a smooth player. There are a couple of players on the Rangers that I think might be paid a little bit too much, and I think those contracts might come back and bite them at some point, but really, in all honesty, they're a good young team. I really like Shesterkin. People know I like Georgiev. I have since he first came up. So I like the Rangers, and my biggest concern is that Dolan, acting as he did yesterday to decide, all right, I'm gonna fire the president and the GM before the season's over, which is the bizarre part. And I'm gonna do this, and it's gonna feel like it's a snap decision. Even if it's not, it still feels that way, and it shocked everybody. I mean, I know there's Ranger fans who are like, yay, good, it's finally done. But for NHL executives around the rest of the league, the reaction's basically been, you're not done your rebuild yet. How can you fire people when the rebuild's not done yet? You're not going to make the playoffs, and this division is impossible. The division they're in is absolutely impossible. So, and we'll see how things turn out for them. And of course, today we'll find out when Buchnevich has his hearing how much he's getting suspended for. It's not a fine. I've seen people saying, "Well, it's going to be a fine then." No, if it's a fine, they just announce it on Twitter. If it's a suspension, you have a hearing. There's no such thing as having a hearing and then getting a fine. So Buchnevich is at least out tonight. And as a Bruins fan, I say, okay. Buchnevich is a really good young forward who can score a bunch of points. And if he's out of the lineup for the Rangers, got it. All right. And they're already short Panarin. So we'll see how that goes tonight. But yeah, he'll at least miss tonight's game. So the Rangers come out of this down $250,000. Buchnevich is going to lose a bunch of money. And again, those teams won't see each other again until October at the earliest. We're going to have the expansion draft between now and then. There's going to be the free agency, trades, everything else is going to happen. And yeah, we'll see how things change and what takes place after that. But I think there's going to be some big changes with New York, and we'll see what direction they go in. Watch for them to be very active in free agency. That's my guess. My guess is they move some money out and they get active in free agency and they try to do that. That's my guess. Glenn Sather being brought back in. Sather spends money, so that's my thinking is they'll probably be right in there on a free agent. So maybe Taylor Hall ends up signing a major long-term contract with the New York Rangers. Maybe that's what happens after this season. All right, and of course, like I said, Buchnevich hearing today. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully, cooler heads prevail from here. Ryan Poehling. So Poehling, I don't know whether to put Poehling in as a player that's been disappointing on any level yet. I think he's too young for that. He's been playing in the AHL and injured his wrist, and he's out for the rest of the season with that wrist injury. So that's kind of too bad because you have to think that Poehling would have been a guy who would have been called up during the playoffs and might have got into a game or two for them. And so, yeah, it's been kind of a write-off season for some players. I guess Poehling is one of those players, and hopefully he's good to go in the fall. Should be with a wrist injury, but we're going to talk about wrist injuries. Interesting news with Boston. So tonight they're going with Swayman, and on Saturday they're going with Rask. Now, clearly there's a 3-goalie rotation going on, but Swayman's pushed himself into this conversation. In fact, Swayman's kind of pushed Halak out of this conversation, and that's where it gets weird for me, because coming into this season, Halak looked like the better goaltender between he and Rask through a lot of last year, and I was kind of expecting that maybe that could happen again this year. That, I thought Halak was just that good, more than it was anything bad to say about Rask. Now, Swayman's kind of pushed his way into that. And come playoff time, you would think that teams will be using a 2-goaltender rotation if we go into another contracted playoffs. And it sounds like it's probably going to be a pretty squashed schedule for the playoffs as well to get everything done by the middle of July. And so, yeah, Swayman may very well be a number 2 goaltender. And maybe that's part of the reason why after what was a kind of a poor game his last time out, Halak snaps his stick and kind of got angry. Halak knows he can play better than that. And right now, Swayman's probably put him out of a job in Boston. At the very least, Swayman's going to be one of the 2 goalies next year. Now, whether or not Rask decides to come back, I would not be surprised if Rask ends up retiring at the end of this season. And then we'll see what Boston does. Do you go with Vladar and Swayman? What do you do? So, if that's the direction they go in, I'm far more comfortable with it now than I would have been a couple months ago. And that's a good thing. All right, Chicago. So Kirby Dach is apparently done for the rest of the season. Now, he hasn't been scoring goals at a rate that one might have expected of him. But if you're fighting with a right wrist injury, that'll happen. And apparently what he's done is he's aggravated the scar tissue on his right wrist. I don't know how much of an aggravation we're looking at here. And the one concern I always have, and I have this concern every time that a player comes back from injury, is, are they actually healthy? Are they actually good? Like, for instance, Sagan. Sagan in Dallas has admitted, well, he's not 100%, but he's close. And I'm thinking, okay, but if you're not 100%, I don't want to see a guy come back and endanger his ability to play later. And so hopefully Kirby Dach didn't come back and feel the pressure to play and end up hurting his chances to be healthy in October. That's my concern with Dach. I like the player a lot. I think he's fantastic. There's a lot of good young players in Chicago. The future's pretty bright there. If they can figure out the goaltending. The future's pretty bright there. And if they have enough cap space to maybe add one veteran on the blue line, I think they'll be pretty good. So they're not. I don't think they're that far off. But yeah, so we'll see what happens. All right. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. I'm hoping for a very quiet, uneventful night in hockey tonight. That'd be nice. You know, I mean, goals and assists and points and all that stuff we normally get, and maybe some fantastic highlight reel saves. But the controversial side of it, we can leave that aside for now. We can just push that to the side for now, and just focus on the rest of it. All right, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.